I'm Batman. Today we're going to be reviewing the movie Batman. And this is my friend Aaron. Batman was released by Warner Brothers. It was the first Batman movie that they released back in 1989. It starred Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson, and Kim Basinger, and it was directed by Tim Burton. This movie was one of the first movies that I actually ever saw. It's one of the earliest memories that I actually have. I was born in 1987, and I remember my uncle taking me to see this movie in the theater, which probably wasn't a good idea considering I was like 2. But I remember it, and there's a picture of me on my birthday in 1990 getting this movie on VHS. And I was hooked ever since. Batman's my favorite superhero. Everything from there on led on to me loving films, so I can thank my uncle for that. And it truly was one of those moments that when you experience it in a movie theater, it changes your life. Do you remember the first time you saw the movie?
I didn't get the chance to see it in a movie theater, unfortunately. The first time I saw it was when it was released on TV, actually. And my mom, like back when we had VCRs, kids, you remember what VCRs are? You remember?
Fast forward and rewind.
Well, that's the great thing. It was like just you could do like it's.
No, it always sucked when you pulled out the VHS you wanted to watch and found out that you had to rewind it for 6 minutes before you could watch it.
That's what we had, but it was it's what we had. But I got a lot of my movies that way. My mom stick in a VHS tape, record. It's like, and Batman was one of those movies, and yeah, it's a similar experience. It was my first actual exposure to the character of Batman. And it's filmmakers talking about like it's that one film that they saw that really kind of sparked like, oh yeah, that's what I want to do. Mm-hmm. Or what Batman did for me was I really introduced me to superheroes. Mm-hmm. Like Batman was my exposure to the superhero world and comics in general. From the opening, from the pounding of the theme music to just the opening visuals, it draws you in.
Yeah.
And it doesn't let you go.
The intro of the movie with it sort of the camera panning through the bat symbol, and you don't know what it is at first, but it just keeps going through, and the Danny Elfman score that you mentioned was incredible. It was so good that they took it and applied it to the Batman animated series later. And it captures the vibe of that film so well. With Tim Burton's style, I don't know if anyone since then has been able to capture Gotham City the way that he did. With the combination of live action and set extensions with models and matte paintings, and it teeters on animation and live action in a way that a lot of movies don't do anymore. Everything is so HD and so cinematic and so CGI that it has this almost like homey feeling you're going to go back and see something that doesn't exist anymore.
We're introduced to this city that is crowded. Mm-hmm. It's
everything's wet and smoky and just it doesn't feel like a good
grimy.
place.
With the opening too, like with that initial family setup, with the dad taking the mom and the kid around, of where they live there. And they don't know where they're going.
Right. It's so big.
And it's so big, so crowded. It is just like this bustle of activity. And it's just the fact that it establishing the world that we're about to dive into was great.
This movie inspired Christopher Nolan in multiple of movies that he released in Batman. And every movie since then. This film set the bar for what it meant to be a Batman film. And in some areas it doesn't hold up. In other areas, it's still the best one. And you're talking about miniatures. There's a shot at the end of the movie where he's in the Batwing and he gets shot down. One of the coolest scenes with his giant gun. And when the Batwing lands on the ground, it's a miniature. And it scoots past cars and lamps and street lights and a cathedral. And then it cuts immediately back to live action with Kim Basinger running down the street. Yeah. And it's so well done that you wouldn't know unless you were looking for it.
But admittedly, some of the compositing, I mean, that's also the problem with high definition, though, too, is that a lot of the older films, when they do those compositing shots, like with the Batwing flying around the city, unfortunately, some of the scenes are visible. But that aside, though,
Right.
that's a great sequence. And as you mentioned, that the use of practical effects, making those models, putting in the work to get the realism that way, rather than just a lot of superhero movies nowadays feel like they need to ground it in reality in some fashion, of like there has to be this level of realism to it. And I think without superhero movies being as prevalent as they are today, they had more liberty to be more fantastical, like you mentioned with the Joker,
Right.
pulling out that thing is like longer than he is.
Yeah.
And like the design choices for like the Batmobile and the Batwing too, it was like they're practically pulled straight from the comic book, brought to screen. Of like no like, oh, is this going to be aerodynamic enough to, or like is it really going to be that believable? They didn't care.
You mean,
they just wanted it to look cool.
That Batmobile in Batman '89 is still my favorite Batmobile out of all the films that have ever been released. To me, that is the Batmobile. And I know everyone's going to have their Batmobile when they see their particular Batman film, but you're wrong.
There is no other Batmobile.
That's the best Batmobile. And we're going to do a ranking system of all of the Batman films, all of the Batmans, all the Batman suits. Batman? Batman? Batmans?
Batmansman?
All the actors that played Batman and which one we think is the best. So we're going to go through all the movies in order of release, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's talk a little bit about Michael Keaton. There was a lot of hubbub on the media about when he was asked to play Batman, and he chose to play Batman because everyone thought, why would you have Michael Keaton? He was a comedian.
Yeah, he's a lot of his work before the Batman was in comedy, and he's viewed as a comedy actor a lot. It feels like he took like a page out of Superman kind of for this one, because with other Batman movies that we'll be discussing is that there's a very clear distinction between obviously Bruce Wayne and Batman, of where Bruce Wayne is the multi-billionaire playboy philanthropist,
Mysterious. No one really knows
right.
what
and
he
he's
is, who he is.
A playboy, and he's always got a woman on his arm, and he's and good looking. But with Michael Keaton, they went with he's the everyman. He looks like any other guy on the street. But back to the Superman point of where they make sure to express how normal he is, how like anybody else that he is.
Right.
And where like other actors that were considered for the role of Bruce Wayne, like I remember Dennis Quaid was one of them, or like any other action heroes of that time were considered, but then ultimately on Michael Keaton. And I think that was a great choice, because with Michael Keaton's performance, he nailed it out of the park. That not just as Bruce Wayne, but as Batman too.
Right. And I think the cool part about Michael Keaton in this movie is that he's very quiet the majority of the time. He's mysterious. You don't really know much about him. And then there's certain scenes where all of a sudden he comes unglued.
And then he had this light shot. Now you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
So the dynamic that he brought with that stoic, like, quiet, I don't know who this guy is. And then you get these random moments where Alfred comes in. Alfred was played by Michael Goff. And he brings out the human side of Bruce Wayne. And he does that in almost every Batman movie. But you get that humanized a moment with Alfred, and then later you get that crazy come unglued, like all the rage that's built up inside. And so I think Michael Keaton nailed it with the dynamics that he brought to both Bruce Wayne and then Batman. One of the best actors that have ever played Batman.
To have a great hero, you also have to have an equally great, if not better, villain.
Yes.
And who
do you cast when you need a crazy guy? Jack Nicholson. I don't even know what to say. Every time he was on screen, it's all you cared about was Jack Nicholson. And the more and more you saw his involvement with the mob, and him coming to the realization that he's been ratted out and gets dumped in this vat of chemicals and transforms into what is known as the Joker. It's captivating to watch that. And then that scene happens. And I know you mentioned to me that was the scene that
scared me.
That scared you when you were a kid.
Well, I remember when I saw it, the room was much darker than when I rewatched it recently. And like, sitting there in this room with all this surgical equipment, and just like the doctors trying to explain to him of like, oh, we've got, we did the best we could.
Yeah,
and like, look at what I have to work with.
One swinging light bulb in the room.
And then, but then it's like, you know,
The bloodied tools.
but then he's
all
sitting
over.
there and he's unraveling, and just like the franticness of when he's, and that's the thing too about with Nicholson's performance, of where the beginning was this cool cat gangster.
Nothing scared him.
No, like nothing scared him, but you could tell just with the look and his demeanor, there was something brimming under the surface there. And I think that really speaks to Jack Nicholson as a character, where he gives those subtle tones of like there's something else underneath the surface. And with what happens to him transforming into the Joker just magnifies that, and it brings it to the forefront. His transition from being Jack Napier to the Joker was just, I mean, you're in awe of it.
And I think the important part too was that the Joker was created by Batman in a way, sort of indirectly, but Batman is the reason why he turned out to be the way he was. And this is, this is something that kind of happened later in The Dark Knight, which we'll get to when we review that. But they, in a way, are like the yin and yang of each other. They exist because of each other. And they're like the perfect protagonist and antagonist in probably all of media. The two of them nailed it. Jack Nicholson, I don't even know what to say. Like, if you don't get moved by that performance, you might be dead inside. The only person that's got a better laugh than Jack Nicholson, and Jack Nicholson, if you're watching this, I'm sorry, but Mark Hamill, that played the Joker in the animated series.
Yeah, I mean
he's the best voice of the Joker. I'm sorry.
A point that gets brought up a lot too of like the relationship between Batman and the Joker, and you're absolutely right. And with the inspiration for this movie coming out, because this came out after other comic books like the Killing Joke and The Dark Knight Returns, which have been influential with Batman ever since they were published, of bringing that grittier tone to Batman. And The Killing Joke specifically talks about a possible origin story for the Joker, the Red Hood origin, of where he's this guy who basically is set up to take the fall for this criminal heist, and then Batman accidentally knocks him into the chemicals, thus turning him into the Joker, which they pulled for this movie. It's the Joker is a cautionary tale of what Batman could have easily become, because they suffer from mental health issues. I mean, especially with Bruce Wayne suffering the death of his parents, and the Joker with his psychotic problems that, I mean, honestly, tipping it one way or the other, it could have gone either way for both of them, too. And I think that's something that Batman recognizes and the Joker recognizes, too. And one point that they try to make in The Killing Joke, too, is that the Joker, what it famously says, like, for someone to trip over in the madness, all it takes is one bad day. And that's what happened, and we get that in full display with this movie of, like, that Jack just had that really bad day. But then afterwards, coming out with a big smile, life's been good to me.
One of my favorite scenes in this movie was when the Batwing, you remember when the Batwing flew up right into the moon, and it slowly gave the bat symbol, and then it fell back down, and it was like...
Fan service.
Ooh. Another favorite scene was when the Batmobile finally comes out, and he drives Vicky Vale back to the Batcave through that forest.
The forest that is in every Tim Burton movie ever, if you see it. If you see it once, you'll see it in every one of his movies.
The trees looked green, and the ground was all leafy, and there's so many iconic lines in this movie, too. Like, have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight?
You ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight?
You never hit a guy with glasses. He just socks him right in the face.
You wouldn't hit a guy with glasses on, would you? Huh?
There's so many good things. You want to get nuts? Like, there's so many good moments in the movie, but you can't talk only about the good things. There are a few things that don't work super well for me, and I don't know if it's the same for you, but I feel like the Joker's bad guys, the henchmen, were just kind of a joke. Like, Bob was all right, but then he just kind of offs Bob out of random.
Poor Bob.
He's just like,
It's done.
He was
Bob
the
did
mo-
everything for you, man.
Oh,
And
I mean,
just because he stole your balloons, you're gonna kill Bob?
I never liked how Bob looked, but Bob, he was a soldier.
Bob was the man.
Yeah, he would follow him till death, which he did.
Yeah. So I mean, it wasn't that compelling for me. I thought Bob was all right, but everyone else was just fodder for Batman to kick in.
But you gotta admit though, I mean, aside from what happened to Bob, working for the Joker has been a ton of fun, man. It's like Joker's like, hey, you guys want to go trash a
Or
museum?
terrifying. You never know when you're gonna get killed for no reason.
Well, fair. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. I didn't personally feel like it worked for me that the Joker ended up being the killer of Bruce Wayne's parents. I think the movie would have been just fine without it, but it did add that level of suspense at the end when Bruce Wayne slowly realized, when he heard that line, have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? And he's like, what did you say? That was cool.
Well, that almost makes it wonder, did they do that too early to just kind of throw it in? Should they have, had they had that before, like his flashback before that happens? Do you think it would have had more of a punch when the Joker finally does say that? It was like
I think if he would have dropped that line earlier, maybe like when he shot Eckhart, although his line back at Eckhart was awesome.
Eckhart! Think about the future.
I just feel like it didn't earn it as much as it could have. If they would have teased that earlier in the movie, and you're like, oh, what did he did say that earlier in the movie, versus like 10 minutes.
Because it does, because it does kind of come out of a left field of just like all of a sudden it's like, that's something I say to all my prey. No, it's not.
Right. What other criticisms do you have of the film?
I've got a few. One of my biggest gripes of this film is the romance between Vicky Vale and Bruce Wayne. I don't like it. I get it, giving a character a romantic interest for the movie, and especially Bruce Wayne and whatnot. The film's a victim of kind of the time it was filmed, of just kind of throwing in these quick romances and whatnot. But the way the film presents that relationship between Bruce Wayne and Vicky Vale is that they meet for one evening, and apparently sleeping together is enough to make a lifelong bond, of where Alfred's really hitting it home to Bruce.
Yeah, and like, why would you
need to marry this girl, Bruce?
Why would you trust... She's the only person that knows he's Batman, other than Alfred. And he's known her for like a week.
And they set that up of where Bruce, like they're having dinner in the dining room, and it's like Bruce, he's like,
right.
I've never eaten in this room before. I didn't even know this room was here. And
better love stories have happened in Batman movies. This one was not the strong suit, and maybe Tim Burton, I don't know if it was writing or if it was shoehorned in from the studio. I don't know. Yeah. But definitely not a strong part of the movie.
Well, and speaking of Alfred, that's another gripe I have with this movie. I think Alfred was underutilized for this movie, because basically he was there to tell Bruce Wayne, it's like, sir, you should get married. To go marry Vicky Vale. This is the first woman who slept with you, and who knows how long you are going to put a ring on that.
Right.
And Alfred's main, at least in my interpretation, if he's always been that moral anchor of where keeping Bruce Wayne grounded enough, reluctantly helping him with this obsession that he has.
Yeah, and I think he's the only thing separating Bruce Wayne from turning into
the Joker,
the Batman forever, or the Joker. Yeah, like you mentioned, in this teeter-totter back and forth of the mental stress that they have, Alfred's the only thing that keeps him alive. Mm-hmm. And I felt like in this movie, Alfred was just, he comes and brings him a little tea and food, and like he was a butler. Go. That was it.
He's so much more.
But Alfred is an integral part of
Bruce,
Batman.
go marry this woman.
Yeah, so I can definitely see that criticism.
Oh, Commissioner Gordon. He didn't get a whole lot to do. I mean, he was there, and then he's there to bark orders at police, but otherwise he was another underutilized character. I mean, if you could trade out characters, I would have traded Knox for more Gordon, I'd say. I mean, having like Gordon or something more on the police front of like who's the Batman. But he was there to basically bark orders and turn on a bat signal at the end of the movie, and that was about it. That's a shame.
Yeah, and then Billy D. Williams as Harvey Dent. I mean, it was fine. There was nothing wrong with him.
Can you imagine if if they went on to do like Tim Burton, like, I'm going to make a third Batman movie, and you know what? He's going to be Two-Face.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I feel like killing the Joker at the end of this movie, spoiler alert, was a misstep. And I'm sure Tim Burton didn't go into this thinking he was going to make a sequel. But when I was watching this again, there were shots where it was coming from a different point of view, and Joker's coat was changing colors from like a purple to like a more of a maroon color.
Was that like he was falling down, or
It was from different angles of him when they're standing on the cathedral, and I was like, was there like an alternate sequence that they filmed in this, or maybe it was just the way that the lighting was or something, but maybe. I felt like maybe they filmed an ending where he didn't die and he did get away in the helicopter, and I don't know what ending I would have liked better. I don't know if it would have been better for him to get away and set up an unknown sequel, or if it was better to end him.
Yeah.
The ending was creepy with his laugh. Yeah. That was creepy. And I was watching it with my son, and he's like, I looked at his face when that happened, and he was like, what the heck? Like,
dead guy laughing.
That's a creepy ending, but
Joker getting the last laugh.
yeah. And I don't know. I feel like they could have kept him alive. In the comments, let me know if you guys like Batman 89. Hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up for a like if you like this video. There's going to be future reviews coming up, and we're going to do a whole ranking system. Speaking of ranking systems,
we got to give this one a rank, don't we?
how many bat symbols would you give this movie?
I would give this movie, with it being as iconic as the style of it is, and the influence that this movie has had on every work that's come after it, I would have to give it, bringing it down a little just because of some missed opportunities with Alfred and the romance of the film, I'd give it 8 out of 10.
I'm going to say right there.
8
out of 10 bat symbols. What's your ranking? Put it down in the comments section. I'm interested to see what you think. And stick around for the next video where we review Batman Returns. See ya.